She doesn't speak a word of English. It's like talking to a wall, Marcus Thorne whispered, his laughter dissolving into the clinking of wine glasses. At the far end of the long table, the Korean millionaire, Park Soo-jin, remained silent, her hand resting gently on an old wooden box. To Marcus and his partner, she was an easy mark. But Chloe, the waitress pouring water, didn't just hear the mockery. She also saw the patterns on the box, an ancient, royal language. They saw a confused old woman. Chloe saw a queen protecting her kingdom, and she was about to witness a robbery disguised as a dinner party. Find out what happens in our new story. Be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss it. Have you ever seen someone completely underestimated? Share your story in the comments below. The private dining room of Le Ciel, Manhattan's crown jewel of haute cuisine, hummed with the clink of crystal glasses and the low murmur of power. Candlelight danced across white linen tablecloths, casting shadows that flickered like secrets. At the head of the long mahogany table, Marcus Thorne leaned back in his chair, his vest buttons catching the light as he raised a glass of Bordeaux. To cultural collaboration, he declared, his voice smooth as the wine but sharp with intent. Beside him, Eleanor Vance echoed the toast, her red dress a stark contrast to the room's muted elegance, her smile as polished as the pearl necklace at her throat. At the far end of the table, Park Soo-jin sat in stillness, an island of calm amid the sea of chatter. Her hands rested lightly on a small lacquered wooden box, its surface gleaming with mother-of-pearl inlays that whispered of peonies and cranes under the dim glow. The faint rustle of her dark handbag, modern yet rooted in tradition, was lost in the room's cacophony. Her eyes, fixed on the box, held a quiet intensity, as if guarding a story no one else could read. The other guests, art dealers, museum curators, and investors, barely glanced her way, their attention tethered to Marcus's booming anecdotes and Eleanor's calculated laughter. Chloe Washington moved through the room like a shadow, her tray balanced with practiced ease. The crisp lines of her black and white uniform blended into the background, as if she'd been trained to vanish. Her straight hair, swept into an elegant bun, stayed pristine despite the frenetic pace of her work. She poured water with precision, her movements silent, her eyes sharp. The hotel manager's words echoed in her mind. Stay invisible. They don't want to see you. Yet as she glided past Marcus, she caught the edge of his smirk, the way his gaze slid over Soo-jin like she was a prop in his performance. This is a historic moment, Marcus continued, his Mont Blanc pen tapping the table for emphasis. A chance to bridge East and West, to bring a piece of Korea to the Metropolitan Museum. His tone was grandiose, but Chloe, refilling a glass, noted the flicker of amusement in his eyes as if the words were a private joke. Eleanor nodded, her diamond ring flashing as she gestured. Absolutely, Marcus. It's about legacy, not just art. Her voice dripped with false sincerity, and a few guests murmured agreement, their forks pausing over seared scallops. Soo-jin remained silent, her fingers tracing the silk made-up knot on her box, its red hue stark against the lacquer. The gesture was subtle, but Chloe caught it, a deliberate act, like a prayer. She felt a pang, not just of curiosity but of recognition. Her nights at Columbia, poring over texts on Korean art history, had taught her to see beyond surfaces. This woman wasn't just a guest, she was a keeper of something sacred. But the room didn't see it. To them, Soo-jin's silence was a void, an invitation to dismiss her. Marcus leaned toward Eleanor, his voice dropping, but not enough to escape Chloe's ear. She's out of her depth, he muttered, his laugh ablaze. Probably thinks this is a charity bazaar. Eleanor's lips curved, her rose-scented perfume wafting as she tilted her head. Give her a pen, she'll sign anything. Easy money. Their words landed like stones, and Chloe's grip tightened on her pitcher, the cool glass grounding her. She glanced at Soo-jin, expecting a reaction, but the widow's face remained serene, her eyes fixed on the box as if it held her entire world. The air grew heavier, the candlelight dimming as if mirroring the shift in Chloe's chest. She'd seen this before, not here, but in lecture halls where her passion for Korean art was met with raised eyebrows, her presence questioned in spaces dominated by privilege. Marcus's voice rose again, addressing the room. The beauty of this deal is its simplicity. A donation to the Met, a tax write-off, and everyone wins. His smile was predatory, and Eleanor's nod was a silent applause. The other guests, lulled by wine and ambition, nodded too, oblivious to the undercurrent. Chloe circled back to Soo-jin's end of the table, her steps deliberate. The faint scent of sandalwood and jasmine drifted from the widow, mingling with the lacquer's earthy tang. It stirred something in Chloe, a memory of late-night studies, of tracing Hangul scripts, of feeling connected to a culture she'd never lived but deeply understood. She poured water, her eyes meeting Soo-jin's for a fleeting moment. There was no confusion in that gaze, only a quiet resolve that sent a shiver through her. As Marcus launched into another toast, his Rolex glinting, Chloe felt the weight of the moment settle. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a stage, and Soo-jin was no mere guest. The box, the silence, the handbox soft rustle, they were pieces of a puzzle the others refused to see. Chloe's heart thudded, her manager's warning clashing with a growing certainty. Something was wrong, and she was the only one who noticed. The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the table. Marcus's laugh rang out again, sharper now as he leaned toward Eleanor, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. Chloe's fingers tightened on her tray, the clink of ice in the pitcher, a faint echo of the storm brewing within her. Whatever Marcus and Eleanor were planning, it was about to unfold, and Soo-jin, silent but not unseen, was at its center. The clink of glasses from the dining room softened as Marcus Thorne's laugh faded into a conspiratorial murmur, his Rolex glinting under the candlelight like a predator's eye. The air at Le Ciel's private table grew thicker, the warmth of the room now stifling, laced with the sharp tang of Eleanor Vance's rose perfume. Chloe Washington glided past with her tray, her steps silent in the crisp black and white uniform, her ears straining to catch the words slipping from Marcus's lips. The dinner had shifted from grand toast to something darker, and she felt it in the pit of her stomach, a knot tightening with every sidelong glance Marcus cast toward Park Soo-jin. Soo-jin sat unchanged at the table's end, her hands still resting on the lacquered box, its peony and crane inlays catching flickers of light. The silk made-up knot, red as a warning, gleamed against the wood, but the other guests, art dealers and curators drunk on wine and ambition, paid her no mind. Their chatter swirled around Marcus's latest anecdote, a tale of a priceless sculpture he'd flipped for millions. Eleanor leaned closer to him, her pearl necklace clicking softly as she tilted her head. "She's a relic clutching a trinket," she whispered, her voice low but sharp enough to pierce the hum. "We'll have her signing by dessert." Chloe's fingers tightened on a wine bottle as she refilled a guest glass, the cool glass grounding her against the heat rising in her chest. Marcus's voice dropped lower, but not low enough. "$1 million for that box and she'll think it's a fortune," he muttered, his smirk audible. "The museum gets a donation, we get the tax break, and our buyer gets the real prize for 10 times that." Eleanor's laugh was a soft hiss, like steam escaping a kettle. "She probably thinks it's a family heirloom. Let her dream." The words landed like a slap, and Chloe's gaze darted to Soo-jin, expecting a flinch. But the widow's face remained serene, her eyes fixed on the box, as if she were carved from the same lacquer. The room spun for Chloe, the clatter of silverware and the drone of conversation fading into a dull roar. She'd heard this kind of talk before, not in dining rooms, but in lecture halls, where her passion for Korean art was dismissed as exotic by professors who saw her as an outsider. Her manager's voice echoed in her mind, "Stay invisible. Serve. Don't speak." But the scent of Eleanor's perfume, cloying and invasive, mixed with the faint earthiness of Soo-jin's box, stirring something deeper, a memory of late-night studies, of tracing Hangul under lamplight, of feeling a culture's pulse through its artifacts. This wasn't just a deal, it was theft, dressed up in silk and wine. Marcus raised his glass again, his voice loud now, addressing the table. "To partnerships that reshape history." The guests clapped, oblivious. their forks scraping plates of truffle-dusted risotto. Soo-jin's hands didn't move, but Chloe caught the slightest shift, a finger brushing the silk knot, deliberate, like a signal. She paused mid-step, her tray wobbling faintly, the ice in her pitcher clinking like a warning bell. Was Soo-jin listening? Did she understand? The widow's calm felt less like ignorance now, more like a storm gathering strength. Chloe moved to clear a plate, her heart thudding as she passed Marcus. His Mont Blanc pen tapped the table, a restless rhythm, as he leaned toward Eleanor again. "By tomorrow we'll have the contract signed and the buyer lined up," he whispered, his breath heavy with wine. "She won't know what hit her." Eleanor's diamond ring flashed as she waved a hand, dismissing a waiter who lingered too close. "It's perfect," she murmured. "A naive mark, a cheap deal, and we walk away heroes." Their laughter mingled, sharp and cold, slicing through the room's warmth. Chloe's breath caught, her fingers trembling as she stacked a plate. The manager's warning rang louder. "Lose this job and you're done." But so did the memory of her thesis, of artifacts stolen in colonial shadows, of cultures reduced to dollar signs. She glanced at Soo-jin again, the widow's stillness now a mirror to her own restraint. The box's lacquer seemed to pulse under the candlelight, its inlays whispering of a history Marcus and Eleanor couldn't fathom. Chloe's tray felt heavier, her role as a silent servant chafing like a collar. As she stepped back into the shadows, the faint scent of sandalwood from Soo-jin lingered, grounding her. Marcus's voice rose once more, rallying the table for another toast, but Chloe barely heard it. Her eyes locked on the box, on the widow's unwavering hands, and a certainty took root. This dinner wasn't about collaboration. It was a trap, and Soo-jin was its target. The question wasn't whether she'd act. It was how long she could stay silent. Chloe Washington's pulse hammered in her ears, the echo of Marcus Thorne's venomous whisper. "She won't know what hit her," still burning as she moved closer to Park Soo-jin's end of the table. The dining room at Le Ciel buzzed with the clatter of silverware and the drone of self-important chatter. But for Chloe, the world narrowed to the lacquered box under Soo-jin's hands. Its surface gleamed under the candlelight, the mother-of-pearl inlays of peonies and cranes shimmering like a secret code. The faint scent of its achil lacquer, earthy and ancient, curled into her senses, pulling her back to lamplit nights at Columbia, where she'd traced the lines of Korean artifacts in dusty tomes. She adjusted her tray, the crisp edge of her uniform brushing her wrist, and stole a glance at Soo-jin. The widow sat as still as ever, her fingers resting on the box's red Mediap knot, its intricate twists a testament to royal craftsmanship. Chloe's breath caught. This wasn't just a box, it was a relic, a vessel of history that Marcus and Eleanor, with their smug toasts and predatory smiles, couldn't begin to understand. Their voices carried from the table's head, Marcus's Mont Blanc pen tapping a restless beat. "A donation like this," he said loudly, "elevates the Met to new heights." The guests nodded, their forks scraping plates, oblivious to the lie beneath his words. Chloe's tray wobbled slightly, the ice clinking softly as she paused near Soo-jin. Her manager's warning, "Stay invisible or you're out," clashed with the fire in her chest. She knew the stakes. One wrong move, and her dreams of curating at the Met, already strained by student debt, would vanish. But the box spoke to her in a language she'd spent years learning, its Najunchilgi inlays whispering of Joshin palaces, of artisans who poured their souls into every curve. Marcus's voice cut through again, sharper now. "She's just a widow with a souvenir," he muttered to Eleanor, his Rolex glinting as he leaned closer. "We'll have it for a song." Eleanor's laugh was a soft, venomous hiss, her rose perfume cloying as it drifted across the table. $1,000,000 will dazzle her," she whispered back, her pearl necklace clicking as she tilted her head. "Then our buyer flips it for 10. Chloe's fingers tightened on a plate she was clearing, the porcelain cold against her skin. The word buyer landed like a stone. This wasn't a donation. It was a theft, a betrayal of everything Chloe had studied, everything she'd fought to prove in a world that often looked past her. She glanced at Soo-jin again, searching for a sign. The widow's hands hadn't moved, but her finger traced the silk knot with a deliberate slowness, as if anchoring herself. Was it a signal? A plea? Chloe's mind raced, her thesis on colonial looting flashing through her thoughts. Artifacts torn from their homes, reduced to commodities. The box wasn't just art, it was a piece of a nation's soul, and Marcus and Eleanor were circling it like vultures. The faint scent of sandalwood from Soo-jin mingled with the lacquer's tang, grounding Chloe in the moment. She felt the weight of her notebook in her apron pocket, where she jotted notes on Hangul and royal seals, a reminder of why she was here. Marcus's voice rose, rallying the table. "This partnership honors history," he said, his smile as sharp as a blade. The guests clapped, their wine glasses glinting, but Chloe barely heard them. Her eyes locked on the box, its inlays catching the light like stars in a night sky. She knew what it was. Not just a relic, but a royal artifact. Its Medip, not a mark of the Joseon court. Her heart thudded, the manager's warning now a distant echo. She'd been invisible her whole life, in lecture halls in this room. But this moment demanded more. Chloe stepped closer to Soo-jin, her tray steady despite the storm within. The widow's eyes lifted, meeting hers for a fleeting second. And in that gaze, Chloe saw not confusion, but clarity. A spark that said Soo-jin understood more than she let on. The realization hit like a jolt. This woman wasn't a victim. She was waiting. But for what? Chloe's silver earrings brushed her neck as she turned away, the faint clink a mirror to her resolve. Marcus's pen tapped faster now, his voice dropping to a whisper as he leaned toward Eleanor, their plan unfolding in the shadows. The candles flickered, casting long shadows across the table. Chloe's tray felt heavier, her role as a silent servant chafing like never before. The box's lacquer seemed to pulse, its language louder than Marcus's lies. Whatever Soo-jin was guarding, it was worth more than their millions, and Chloe knew she couldn't stay silent much longer. The candles in Lucielle's private dining room flickered as Marcus Thorne's Mont Blanc pen tapped a sharp, impatient rhythm against the mahogany table, signaling the dinner's pivot to business. The clatter of silverware faded, replaced by the rustle of papers as he pulled a contract from his leather folder. Chloe Washington, her tray steady despite the storm in her chest, lingered near Park Soo-jin's end of the table. The lacquered box's peony and crane inlays glinting like a beacon under the dim light. The faint scent of its achil lacquer lingered, grounding her as Marcus's voice rose, smooth and predatory. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's talk legacy." Soo-jin sat motionless, her hands still on the box. The red made-up knot a vivid slash against its dark surface. Her silence, once dismissed as ignorance, now carried a weight that Chloe felt across the room. The other guests, art dealers and curators lulled by wine, leaned forward, their eyes on Marcus as he waved the contract with a flourish. $1 million, he declared, his smile gleaming like his Rolex. A generous donation to the Metropolitan Museum for this unique artifact. The word artifact dripped with condescension, as if the box were a trinket plucked from a flea market. Eleanor Vance nodded, her pearl necklace clicking softly as she leaned toward Soo-jin. "Think of the tax benefits," she purred, her diamond ring flashing as she gestured. "You'll be a hero of cultural exchange, preserving history for generations." Her voice was honeyed, but Chloe, refilling a water glass nearby, caught the glint in her eyes, a vulture sizing up its prey. The contract slid across the table toward Soo-jin, its pages crisp and menacing, the fine print dense with traps. Chloe's gaze darted to the text, catching phrases like transfer of ownership and non-negotiable terms. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't a donation. It was a heist. The room seemed to shrink, the candlelight casting long shadows that danced across the table like specters. Chloe's fingers tightened on her pitcher, the ice clinking faintly, a mirror to the chaos in her mind. Her manager's warning, "Stay invisible or you're out," battled the fire of her conviction. She'd spent years studying artifacts like the one before her, learning their stories of resilience and loss. The box wasn't just royal, it was a piece of Korea's soul, and Marcus and Eleanor were poised to sell it to the highest bidder. She glanced at Soo-jin, searching for a crack in her calm, but the widow's face remained serene, her finger tracing the silk knot with a slowness that felt deliberate, almost defiant. Marcus leaned forward, his pen now still, his voice dropping to a patronizing coo. It's a simple decision, he said, addressing Soo-jin directly for the first time. Sign here, and you'll leave a mark on history. The guests murmured approval, their glasses raised in a half-hearted toast. Eleanor's smile widened, her rose perfume cloying as it drifted across the table. It's what your husband would have wanted, she added, her tone dripping with false empathy. The mention of Soo-jin's late husband hung in the air, a calculated jab, and Chloe's breath caught, her tray wobbling as she steadied it. Soo-jin's hand paused on the box, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly, a flicker of steel beneath her calm. The gesture was subtle, but to Chloe it was a clarion call. She knew that look, not confusion, but calculation. Soo-jin wasn't the naive widow they assumed. The faint rustle of her handbag broke the silence as she shifted, her fingers tightening on the knot, as if anchoring herself to a truth the room couldn't see. Chloe's heart thudded, her notebook of Hangul notes heavy in her apron pocket. She'd read about colonial theft, about artifacts torn from their homes, but seeing it unfold before her was a different kind of wound. Marcus pushed the contract closer, his smile tightening. We're all partners here, he said, his voice edged with impatience. Eleanor's high heels tapped the floor, a restless rhythm that echoed his urgency. The guests watched, their chatter stilled, sensing the moment's weight. Chloe stepped closer to Soo-jin, her silver earrings brushing her neck as she poured water, her eyes locked on the widow's hands. The lacquer's earthy scent mingled with a trace of sandalwood, stirring her resolve. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about justice, about a legacy that deserved better than Marcus's greed. The candles dimmed, their flames wavering as if holding their breath. Soo-jin's silence stretched, a taut wire ready to snap. Chloe's tray felt like a shield, her role as a servant now a fragile mask. Marcus's pen hovered over the contract, his eyes glinting with anticipation. Whatever Soo-jin was about to do, Chloe knew the moment was slipping away. The box's inlay seemed to pulse, its language louder than ever, and Chloe's resolve hardened. She couldn't stay invisible, not now, not when history itself was at stake. The contract lay open on the mahogany table, its pages glaring under Le Ciel's flickering candlelight, a silent challenge to Park Soo-jin's unwavering calm. Marcus Thorne's Mont Blanc pen hovered, his smile taut as he leaned forward, the glint of his Rolex cutting through the dim room. A signature, and history is made, he urged, his voice a velvet blade. Eleanor Vance's high heels tapped a restless rhythm, her rose perfume cloying as she nodded, her pearl necklace clicking softly. The other guests held their breath, their wine glasses forgotten, sensing the moment's weight. Chloe Washington stood frozen near Soo-jin, her tray heavy, the ice clinking like a countdown to chaos. Soo-jin's hands rested on her lacquered box, the red made-up knot stark against its peony and crane inlays, her fingers tracing its silk with a deliberate slowness that seemed to defy Marcus's urgency. Chloe's heart pounded, her manager's warning, stay invisible or you're out, drowned by the memory of colonial thefts she'd studied, of artifacts reduced to trophies. The faint scent of the box's achil lacquer mingled with Soo-jin's sandalwood, a tether to a heritage Chloe had spent years understanding. She couldn't let this theft happen. Not here, not now. The room's air thickened, the candles wavering as if bracing for a storm. Marcus pushed the contract closer, his pen tapping once sharply. It's a generous offer, he said, his eyes narrowing at Soo-jin's silence. Eleanor's smile tightened, her diamond ring flashing as she leaned in. $1 million is more than fair, she added, her voice dripping with false warmth. Soo-jin's gaze lifted, her eyes meeting Marcus's for the first time, a flicker of steel beneath her calm. The gesture was subtle, but to Chloe, it was a spark in a powder keg. She couldn't wait any longer. Chloe set her tray down on a side table, the clink of metal slicing through the room's hum. Every eye turned as she stepped to Soo-jin's side, her crisp uniform no longer a cloak of invisibility. Her breath steadied, her notebook of Hangul notes heavy in her apron pocket, a reminder of the history she'd sworn to honor. She straightened, her shoulders opening, and performed a 90-degree Korean bow, deep and deliberate, the kind reserved for reverence. The room froze. Marcus's pen stilled. Eleanor's clutch slipped from her fingers, hitting the table with a soft thud. In classical Korean, Chloe's voice rang clear, soft but unyielding. "Madam, forgive my intrusion, but a nation's heritage cannot be priced in dollars." The words, drawn from texts she'd studied under lamplight, carried the weight of centuries. Gasps rippled through the guests, their forks clattering against plates. Marcus's face reddened, his jaw tightening as if struck. Eleanor's eyes widened, her pearl necklace catching the light as she leaned back, stunned. The air crackled, the candles flickering wildly now, as if the room itself recoiled from the truth. Soo-jin's gaze met Chloe's, and for a moment, time stopped. A spark of gratitude, sharp and alive, flashed in the widow's eyes, her calm giving way to a quiet fire. Her hand tightened on the box, the silk knot gleaming like a battle standard. Chloe stood tall, her silver earrings brushing her neck, her heart racing but her voice steady. She pointed to the contract, her words now in English, measured and precise. "This deal strips her legacy for profit. The fine print hands the artifact to a private buyer, not the museum." The accusation hung like smoke, heavy and undeniable. Marcus stammered, his pen clattering to the table. "You're out of line," he snapped, his voice cracking with fury. Eleanor's heels stopped tapping, her face paling as she clutched her chair. The guests shifted, whispers erupting, their eyes darting between Chloe and Soo-jin. The widow's handbag rustled faintly as she leaned forward, her presence no longer a shadow but a force. She hadn't spoken, but her silence now felt like a gavel, poised to judge. Chloe's chest tightened, the weight of her actions sinking in. She'd broken every rule, her job, her future at the Met, all teetering on the edge. But the lacquer's scent, the memory of stolen seals and shattered histories, anchored her. She'd spoken for Soo-jin, for the box, for a culture that deserved better than Marcus's greed. The room's shadows lengthened, the candles barely holding their flame. Soo-jin's eyes held Chloe's, a silent acknowledgement that something monumental had shifted. Marcus's voice rose, a desperate attempt to regain control. "This is absurd," he barked, but the guest's murmurs drowned him out. Eleanor's hand trembled, her ring catching the light as she reached for her clutch. Soo-jin's fingers tightened on the box, her gaze now a blade, ready to cut through the lies. Chloe stood firm, her bow still echoing in the silence, a gesture louder than words. The storm had broken, and whatever Soo-jin did next would change everything. The silence in Lacielle's dining room was deafening. Chloe Washington's words, "A nation's heritage cannot be priced in dollars," still ringing like a struck bell. The candles flickered wildly, casting jagged shadows across the mahogany table where the contract lay, its pages now a tattered monument to Marcus Thorne's unraveling scheme. His Mont Blanc pen lay abandoned, his face flushed with fury, while Eleanor Vance's clutch sat forgotten, her pearl necklace trembling as she gripped her chair. The guests' whispers swelled into a chaotic hum, their eyes darting between Chloe, standing resolute, and Park Soo-jin, whose calm had transformed into a quiet storm. Soo-jin rose, her handbag rustling softly, a sound as deliberate as a drawn blade. Her hands cradled the lacquered box, its peony and crane inlays glinting under the candlelight. The red mediap knot a vivid emblem of defiance. Every eye followed her, the room holding its breath as she stepped forward, her presence no longer a shadow but a force that commanded the space. Chloe's heart pounded, her silver earrings brushing her neck as she stood firm, the weight of her bow still lingering. The faint scent of sandalwood and lacquer swirled around Soo-jin, a reminder of the history Chloe had fought to protect. In flawless English, Soo-jin's voice cut through the silence, clear and unyielding. "This is no trinket," she said, her eyes locking onto Marcus with a ferocity that made him flinch. "And I am no fool." She lifted the box's lid, revealing a jade seal nestled on a crimson silk lining, its surface carved with intricate hangle, glowing like a star in the dim light. Gasps rippled through the guests, their wineglasses forgotten. "This is the seal of King Sejong the Great," Soo-jin declared, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "Creator of Hangul, Stolen during colonial times, believed lost forever. Marcus's jaw dropped, his Rolex glinting as his hand twitched, grasping for control. That's impossible, he stammered, his voice cracking. Eleanor's face paled, her diamond ring catching the light as she leaned back, her heels silent for the first time. The guests' murmurs grew frantic, their forks clattering against plates. Chloe's breath caught, her notebook heavy in her apron pocket, her studies flooding back. Sejong's seal, a symbol of Korea's soul, a relic she'd only read about in faded texts. The lacquer's earthy scent anchored her, a testament to Soo-jin's truth. Soo-jin's gaze swept the room, her eyes now blades cutting through the pretense. "You thought me silent because I was weak," she said, her tone icy. "You thought my heritage could be bought for $1 million, to be sold to your buyer for profit." She pointed to the contract, its fine print exposed by Chloe's courage. "This document would have stripped my family's legacy, my nation's history for your greed." Marcus's face reddened further, his hands clenching into fists. "You're mistaken," he snapped, but his voice wavered, drowned by the guests' rising outrage. Eleanor reached for her clutch, her fingers trembling. "This is a misunderstanding," she said, her smile forced, but Soo-jin's gaze silenced her. "There is no misunderstanding," Soo-jin said, her handbox swaying as she stepped closer to the table. "You saw a widow and assumed ignorance. You saw my culture and assumed it was for sale." The words landed like blows, each one stripping away the facade Marcus and Eleanor had built. The guests shifted, their whispers turning to accusations, their eyes now on the disgraced pair. Chloe stood rooted, her chest tight with awe and fear. She'd risked everything, her job, her dreams at the Met. But Soo-jin's words validated her stand. The seal's jade gleamed, its Hangul carvings a silent rebuke to the room's ignorance. Soo-jin's eyes met Chloe's, a spark of gratitude passing between them, unspoken but profound. The widow's hand rested on the box, her fingers brushing the silk knot, a gesture of strength that Chloe mirrored in her own steady stance. Marcus tried to rise, his vest buttons flashing as he gestured wildly. "This is outrageous," he barked, but the guests ignored him, their voices a rising tide. Eleanor's heels scraped the floor, her face a mask of panic. Soo-jin closed the box with a soft click, the sound echoing like a gavel. "This dinner is over," she said, her voice final. The candles dimmed, their flames barely holding as the room's shadows deepened. Chloe's heart raced, the weight of her actions settling in, but Soo-jin's gaze held her steady, a promise of something greater to come. The seal's glow lingered in Chloe's mind, its carvings a testament to a history she'd fought for. Marcus's protest faded into the guest clamor, and Eleanor's clutch slipped to the floor, forgotten. Soo-jin stood tall, her box a shield, her silence now a weapon. Whatever came next, Chloe knew the widow was ready to redefine the room's truth, and she'd be at her side. The echo of Park Soo-jin's words, "This dinner is over," hung in Luciel's private dining room, as heavy as the torn contract scattered across the mahogany table. The candles flickered weakly, their light barely touching the jade seal's glow, now hidden within the lacquered box under Soo-jin's steady hands. Marcus Thorne's protests had dissolved into a sputtering cough, his Rolex glinting as he sank into his chair, his face a mask of fury and defeat. Eleanor Vance's clutch lay abandoned on the floor, her pearl necklace trembling as she gripped the table's edge, her eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. The guest whispers surged into a tide of outrage, their wine glasses forgotten, their gazes fixed on Soo-jin's commanding presence. Chloe Washington stood rooted beside the widow, her heart pounding, the weight of her intervention settling like a stone. The faint scent of the box's Achel lacquer mingled with Soo-jin's sandalwood, grounding her in the chaos. Her manager's warning, "Stay invisible or you're out," was a distant echo, drowned by the fire of her conviction. She'd spoken out, risked everything, and now Soo-jin's silence, once a mystery, felt like a gavel poised to deliver judgment. The widow's handbag rustled softly as she stepped forward, her hands cradling the box, its red made-up knot a defiant emblem against the room's shadows. Soo-jin's voice, clear and unyielding, cut through the clamor. "This dinner was never about a sale. she said, her eyes sweeping the room, pinning Marcus and Eleanor like specimens under glass. It was a test. The word landed like a thunderclap, silencing the guests. Marcus's jaw tightened, his vest buttons flashing as he shifted, but Soo-jin's gaze held him still. I came to find a home for this seal, she continued, her voice steady. A place that would honor my nation's heritage with respect. You, her eyes narrowed at Marcus and Eleanor, have failed miserably. Eleanor's heels scraped the floor, a desperate sound, as she tried to speak. This is a misunderstanding, she stammered, her voice thin. Soo-jin's hand tightened on the box, the lacquer's gleam a silent rebuke. There is no misunderstanding, she said, her tone icy. You saw my silence as weakness, my culture as a commodity. You planned to sell the seal of King Sejong to a private buyer, to strip my family's legacy for profit. The guests gasped, their murmurs turning to accusations, their eyes burning into Marcus and Eleanor, who shrank under the weight. Chloe's chest tightened, awe mingling with fear. Her notebook, heavy in her apron pocket, held notes on Sejong's seal, a relic she'd only dreamed of seeing. Soo-jin's words validated her stand, but the cost loomed. Her job, her dreams at the Met, all hanging by a thread. Yet the widow's gaze shifted to her, softening with a spark of gratitude. But you, Soo-jin said, her voice warming, saw beyond the surface. Your knowledge, your courage have shown me hope. She reached into her handbox sleeve, producing a business card, and offered it to Chloe with both hands, a gesture of profound respect. Chloe's breath caught, her silver earrings brushing her neck as she accepted the card, her fingers trembling. The gesture felt like a lifeline, a bridge between her studies and a future she hadn't dared imagine. The room's shadows seemed to retreat, the candles steadying as if mirroring her resolve. Marcus's voice broke through, a desperate rasp. This is absurd, he barked, but the guests ignored him, their voices a rising chorus of disapproval. Eleanor's face paled, her diamond ring catching the light as she clutched her chair, her composure crumbling. Soo-jin closed the box with a soft click, the sound echoing like a verdict. The seal will find a home, she said, her eyes returning to the guests, but only where respect is earned. She turned to Chloe, her gaze steady. You have proven what honor means. I will not forget. The words carried a promise, a weight that settled in Chloe's bones. The lacquer's earthy scent lingered, a reminder of the history she'd fought for, while Soo-jin's sandalwood anchored the moment, a quiet vow between them. The guests' outrage swelled, their questions peppering Marcus and Eleanor, who sat frozen, their scheme exposed. The candles burned low, casting long shadows that seemed to swallow the pair. Chloe stood tall, the business card warm in her hand, her role as a servant now a distant memory. Soo-jin's box rested against her, a shield and a beacon, its inlays glinting with purpose. The dinner had been a test, and Chloe had passed, but the true reward she sensed was yet to come. The weight of Park Soo-jin's promise lingered in the air, her business card still warm in Chloe Washington's hand, as the candles in Lucielle's dining room burned to stubs, their light fading like Marcus Thorne and Eleanor Vance's shattered ambitions. The torn contract lay scattered, a relic of their exposed greed, while the guests' outraged murmurs had quieted into a hum of awe. Soo-jin's lacquered box, its peony and crane inlays glinting faintly, rested on the table, a silent testament to the history Chloe had defended. The faint scent of sandalwood and achel lacquer hung around her, a reminder of the night that had changed everything. Months later, the sterile glow of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's conservation room replaced the dining room's candlelight. Chloe stood before a glass case, her crisp uniform long gone, replaced by a tailored blazer and skirt, her notebook now a tablet filled with notes on Korean art. The jade seal of King Sejong the Great gleamed under soft lights, its Hangul carvings a beacon of resilience. Soo-jin had kept her word, donating the seal to the Met, but with a condition that echoed her resolve, the creation of the Park Soo-jin Fellowship for Korean Art Preservation. Chloe, its first recipient, was no longer a waitress but an assistant curator, her name etched on a plaque beside the exhibit. The memory of that night replayed as Chloe adjusted the display, her fingers steady despite the weight of her new role. Marcus and Eleanor's names had faded from the art world, their reputations buried under whispers of their failed scheme, their absence a quiet victory. She hadn't lingered on their downfall. Her focus was here, in the seal's glow, in the history she'd fought for. The faint clink of tools from a nearby conservator echoed the ice in her pitcher months ago, a reminder of how far she'd come. Her silver earrings brushed her neck as she stepped back, checking the exhibit's alignment, her heart swelling with purpose. Soo-jin entered the room, her handbag a muted blue now, its rustle soft as she approached the case. The lacquered box was absent, but the red My Diep knot from that night adorned a small stand beside the seal, a nod to their shared triumph. She stopped beside Chloe, her presence as commanding as ever, the faint scent of sandalwood grounding the moment. "You've done well," Soo-jin said, her voice warm but firm, her eyes tracing the seal's carvings. "This is where it belongs, not in a vault, but in the light, where its story can live." Chloe's breath caught, the business card from that night now framed in her office, a talisman of courage. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice steady, echoing the resolve she'd found at Le Ciel. Soo-jin's gaze met hers, a silent smile passing between them, as profound as the bow Chloe had offered months ago. The widow's hand brushed the knot silk, her gold ring catching the light, a quiet echo of their bond. "You saw what they could not," Soo-jin said. "That is why you're here." The exhibit's opening loomed, and Chloe had spent weeks preparing, her tablet filled with research on Sejong's legacy, her nights no longer spent serving but studying. The fellowship had opened doors, lectures, collaborations, a chance to honor the culture she'd loved through dusty texts and lamplit nights. The Met's halls buzzed with anticipation, curators and scholars passing through, their voices a far cry from the dining room's condescension. Chloe's role was small but vital, her expertise shaping the narrative of the seal's return, a story of resilience over greed. The conservation room's hum faded as Soo-jin stepped closer to the case, her eyes softening. "This seal carries my family's vow," she said, her voice low, "to bring our history home. You've helped fulfill it." Chloe's chest tightened, the weight of those words settling in her bones. She'd risked everything that night, her job, her dreams. But the reward was this, standing beside Soo-jin, guarding a legacy that transcended dollars. The seal's jade glowed, its carvings a silent hymn to their shared purpose. As Soo-jin turned to leave, her handbag rustling softly, she paused, her gaze lingering on Chloe. "Dignity has no price," she said, her words a final gift. Chloe nodded, her tablet heavy in her hand, the knot's red silk vivid against the case. The room's lights dimmed, the seal's glow steady, a beacon for the exhibit to come. Chloe stood alone, her resolve unshaken, ready to carry the story forward. Outside, the Met's halls waited, and with them, a future she'd earned. One bow, one truth, one seal at a time. As the lights of the Metropolitan Museum dimmed on the seal's unveiling, Chloe Washington and Park Soo-jin shared one final glance. Their bond forged in the fire of that fateful dinner, a testament to the power of seeing beyond silence. From a waitress's bow to a curator's legacy, the story reminds us, respect bridges worlds, and courage rewrites destinies. What about you? Have you ever witnessed or embodied the quiet strength that changes everything? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories inspire us all. Thank you for joining this journey through heritage and heart. Until next time, keep listening to the unspoken Hen Gap Lie.